Hi, good morning, everyone. Really appreciate you guys joining us this afternoon. We are super excited about this presentation. We wanted to do a quick introduction of our presenter, Kelsey Ducheneau. She's our Natural Resources Director, and she is a fourth-generation tribal rancher that calls the Cheyenne River Sioux Nation home. She received her Bachelor's of Science degree in Rangeland Management from South Dakota State University, and then her Master's of Agriculture degree in Integrated Resource Management from Colorado State University. She is also the owner of a direct-to-consumer beef business in South Dakota called DX Beef. And we're really excited that you could join us. And my name is Latasha Redhouse. I'm the American Indian Foods Program Director. Completely forgot to mention that, but let's go ahead and dive right into this great webinar.
All right, well, thank you everybody for having me. It really is a pleasure to be here virtually today. I know that with the current state of affairs, everybody's getting a lot of really great information out there digitally. And I started working with Latasha and Courtney a couple of weeks back to just say, you know, we would love to have I would love to share a little bit of what I've learned in starting DX Beef and talk a little bit about the potential really right now for our cattle producers to fill a market demand and need that exists currently within our food system. So we played around with the title for quite a while and we landed on Bootleggin our business. And we really want to focus on the profitability and impact as a beef cattle rancher that you can have in today's current marketplace. But we also want to make sure that our cattle ranchers are safe. They're knowledgeable about what they're doing in raising beef. And so we are going to just go right ahead and get started. DX Beef, for those of you that are not familiar with DX Beef, we're a small value-added ag business on the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation of South Dakota. I initiated the development of DX Beef in 2017. We formalized as an LLC late last year, and this year really has been phenomenal, the amount of growth that we've been able to realize as a small business selling direct-to-consumer beef. And I really do put a lot of that emphasis behind me just taking the time to schedule time to sit down in an office and work on the development plans, the structure, the organization, the inventory management, all of that back office stuff that it takes to make a business happen. The market demand was there for direct locally sold beef, but it takes a special amount of time sitting down to establish all of the paperwork in place and to truly understand what your market potential is before you can actually realize the benefit of having that local business within your communities. We really believe in driving a local, more resilient food system for our communities while promoting more economic stability for agricultural producers. And there's a couple of ways that we really try to explore these concepts, but it's all related back to our mission, which is beef that is regenerative, nutritious, and rooted in our communities. And I really want to break this down just a little bit because I think it's important as a beef business owner, how we talk about our product. I choose to use the word regenerative when I talk about any production system of whether it be natural resources or cattle ranching across any spectrum of the work that gets done in Indian agriculture. You know, by definition, sustainable is being able to maintain a certain rate or level, to be able to uphold or defend a particular production level. And that's not what the right type of beef cattle production is. Beef cattle production is regenerative by definition. It's tending to or characterized by regeneration. It's the act of building or forming new animal or plant tissue. And we are actually seeing a lot of discussion around the concept of regenerative beef production helping to improve and actually negate some of the climate impacts that we're realizing on a global scale. So I want to be known not only for raising beef, but knowing that the product that we're raising is marketable as good for the environment, it's nutritious, it promotes resilient food systems, and it gets at the heart of serving our local communities. Now, the transition process that I experienced personally, I'm a land steward first and foremost. I'm a soil nerd and a plant enthusiast, but I can't eat plants that grow on the grasslands of South Dakota. I can't impact the land the way the land has evolved to be impacted with a cloven-hooved animal. And this is truly where becoming a cattle rancher took me to the next level of being a land steward. I learned that being in the cattle business, I can manipulate the exposure to this landscape of my cattle, and as a result, see a more regenerative impact. I can see my grasses coming back more lush and more vibrant and more diverse year after year based on my management practices. And really my involvement as a cattle rancher brought to light some of the falsehoods and common misconceptions of cattle ranchers that exist not just within the industry, but really around the world and in every industry. Even on my own reservation, I realized that there was kind of a misconception in general about, you know, what cattle ranchers do and how they impact the land. And there's a lot of, you know, I would say negative highlights that get focused on when it comes to cattle ranching. But as a soil nerd and a plant enthusiast, like I mentioned before, I genuinely realized the benefit that cattle ranching had on the ecosystem, and realized the value that it could have if I were to expand that cattle ranching business further into selling beef. And selling beef has really been how I've been able to help share the story of the fact that what we're doing is good for the environment. What we're trying to build in our local community food system model is great for the local economy. It's healthier for the local food systems and for the people that are consuming the product. And it can actually help to, you know, relocalize some of that food dollar and strengthening the economy, strengthening the community of local businesses. But until I'm able to share that story as a technical assistant, which is what I'm doing here today, it's gonna stop with me, or some other business is gonna be trying to rebuild the same concept. And so when Lottie and Courtney and I kind of put our heads together on this, we decided, you know what? Let's share this story. Let's talk a little bit about some of the hurdles that I've come across. And truly, with the recent COVID-19 crisis and the market demands, it's given me room to slow down a little bit. I sold out my supply of beef that I thought was going to carry us through May on March 27th. And so that's given me some time to sit down and to think through some of these logistics and concepts that I really do want to share with everybody today. So let's talk a little bit first about the profit spread from a cattle rancher to a beef rancher. There's some financial analysis that should go into this, right? So if we look very specifically or very openly at what 550-pound calves were bringing last fall, it was around $850. That same calf, if you were to, you know, be able to maintain and raise it to the age of a 800-pound yearling, was valued at around $1,100. Now, the carcass value of that 800-pound animal in the form of quarters is actually around $2,600 if you use the grass-fed beef index, and if you were to quarter that carcass out and sell it direct to consumer as 4 quarters of a beef. So you can realize there that very single animal can realize a variety of economic benefit for the producer, from being sold as a calf fresh off of his mama, or maintained all the way through being delivered to the butcher to be sold as direct to consumer product. Now, that same price variance is allowed for the cull cow as well. We're seeing, based on last week's cull cow price analysis, an animal that was weighing around 1,165 pounds for a cull cow was averaging a price of about $62.99 per hundredweight. So the average price on that cow was around $734, dropped off at a sale barn, sold through the sale ring. But truly, if that same cull cow, if she was in good condition, an 1,165 pound animal would yield you around 400 pounds of burger, sold at the current market value here locally of about $5 a pound. That yields you $2,000 of economic value for that same 730 pound cull animal. So you can really see that there is a profit spread. When you look at your livestock, you should recognize the amount of value that you place on that inventory. And really, it's a mindset change. If you're thinking about raising beef, or if you're thinking about raising a livestock animal, being cattle. Now, let's look at a different visual, because I think this visual is really critical and important, and it helps to validate the spread that we just talked about. Before we really jump into any more numbers, we need to recognize the breakdown of a food dollar. So on the screen here, you see 100 squares. It's 10 squares wide by 10 squares down. And that is the equivalent of 100 pennies. And when you think of an individual food dollar that gets spent in any grocery store, we recognize that the current Economic Research Service indications are that for every $1 spent on a piece of food in the grocery store, around 14.6 cents is actually what that food producer realizes. So the green segment of those 100 pennies that equal one food dollar is what the producer is realizing in economic benefit or profit. Now, that's not to say that every time you go to the grocery store and you spend $1, 14 cents is mailed to the farmer or rancher that grew it. The food system's a lot more complex than that. But when you look at the lifespan of that product and where the breakdown of those dollars are derived from, that's what it looks like. The red squares would be representative of the market sector that adds value to the product or makes the product available on the store shelf for production. So now when we talk specifically to beef, we recognize, American Meat Institute has done a really good job of presenting this visual representation of total days from production of processing a ground beef to the sell by date that is listed when ground beef must be sold off the store shelf. So you can see here that the vacuum packaged primal trim, ground, and store, that's the longest production to shelf life, shelf stable product that's available. It's around 35 to 38 days. Typically, you don't see a whole lot of this sort of ground beef shelf life production type taking place in the grocery stores that serve our rural communities, or a whole lot of communities in general. But for the sake of using the longest amount of time possible that this product was in the form of the beef commodity, I'm going to show the next display, which then represents the lifespan breakdown of a grass-fed beef animal. So green would now represent the time that that product was in the producer's sector. So the rancher that owned that animal, cared for that animal, alongside the time that that product was in the marketing sector. So just to kind of give a quick breakdown of how I identified this, there's around 891 days of life from gestation to the butchering of a grass-fed carcass. And there's 40 days maximum of butchering to the tabletop based on American Meat Institute's representation on the slide prior. So it breaks down to about 4% of an animal's lifespan is controlled by the marketing sector, where 96% is controlled by the producer sector. But when we put this comparison side by side, we realize that, whoa, this is really not an accurate representation of where the food dollars are going and who has put the majority of the work into that product. So on the left, you see the amount of time and where the product spent the amount of its time. So green is when the producers cared for it. And on the right, you see the food dollar distribution, where the majority of the food dollar is realized by the marketing sector, indicated in red, and only 14.6 of the food dollar is represented in the product by the producer in green. So now then, how do we start to make that transition from raising cattle and realizing 14.6% of the food dollar benefit to capitalizing on some of that marketable product and actually selling grass-fed beef or direct-to-consumer beef, local beef in the local markets, and trying to localize that food system again? Well, we have to really understand what are some of the legal structures in place, how do we make sure our product is safe, and how do we really manage that debt and add value appropriately so that when we bring a product to market, we know that it's safe, okay? So there's a couple of concepts that we'll explore in this next couple of slides, but truly we have to recognize that there's education and information. So education is the concept of gaining knowledge and understanding what is at play. And then there's information, which is how do you make a decision? So we're going to talk about educating producers so that producers have the knowledge that it takes to provide a product that will inform the consumer so that the consumer can make a choice of where they will spend their food dollar. We're also going to talk a little bit about the different levels of butchering facilities that exist within a state to understand which one of them can provide you with a safe product that is legal for resale within your state or within your region. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how do you make that mental transition from realizing that you're raising live cattle to raising live beef and how do you manage your debt to support your transition into value-added production. All right, so varying slaughter facility types. Each state and jurisdiction has their own laws and standards, so I want to be very candid with you in mentioning that I am most well-versed, and I'm not going to say perfectly versed because it seems like I learned something new every month, but most well-versed within the state of South Dakota. So I would definitely encourage producers that are joining from outside of South Dakota to look into your state's specific laws and understanding that there may be variances and differences from one reservation to the next or from one state to the next, really critical to understand. In the state of South Dakota, though, what I've learned is that there are multiple levels of slaughter facilities that producers can take their animal to for the butchering process. One of them is a custom exempt status. So custom exempt means that this butcher is providing butchering services directly to a producer who is going to consume their own beef product. So this would be Kelsey taking her butcher to the butcher a couple of towns away, dropping my animal off and agreeing that I'm not going to resell this animal. This is my animal. I'm going to have it butchered for my own personal consumption. That's a custom exempt slaughter. It basically places the liability back on the producer to say that, hey, this producer, Kelsey, is obviously only going to eat a product that she believes to be safe and true and is willing to eat. So she's going to go and drop her animal off, get it custom exempt slaughtered, take it home, put it in her freezer. It's all going to be marked not for resale because it's illegal within the state of South Dakota for her to resell that product. Another layer of slaughter facilities that exist are the state inspected facilities, meaning that there is a state meat inspector that comes into the facility and approves not only the facility, but the butchering process and the product that comes through to be state inspected. Some states, South Dakota does not do this yet, but some states have like a state inspected, but within a cooperation of additional states, neighboring states perhaps, that they feel has the same state inspection process as they do. So it's state inspected and can be resold within one of the states that they have a cooperative arrangement with. If they're simply state inspected, that means that your product that is state inspected through that facility cannot be resold beyond those state boundaries. And then we also have federally inspected, which is a facility that has a federal meat inspector come in, inspect the facility, the product, the butchering process, and ensures that that product is therefore federally inspected, which then can be sold anywhere within the United States. Now, again, I'm talking specifically to South Dakota, but I do want to make sure and mention, that as a tribal sovereign nation, we have the capability of identifying our own slaughter facility inspection protocols. The Quapaw Tribe of Oklahoma is one that I'll give a shout out to, because I know that they've established their own tribal inspection protocols. That is actually, I believe it is an even stricter inspection process than the federally inspected, because it is GAP certified, and they're able to allow for the resale of their beef internationally. And then the processing differences between the facilities, right? If we are taking a animal product to one of these facilities to be butchered, I feel like it is up to me as the producer to understand, what are their kill processes? How are they packaging their beef? Is it vacuum sealed, or is it going to be paper wrapped? What do they charge? Is this charged based on a hanging weight, or is it based on the amount of packaged product that they provide to me? These are considerations as a cattle producer that is looking into establishing a beef business. You really should consider as you navigate understanding the legal structures or the inspection policies that your state has, and determining the correct slaughter facility that you want to initiate this business through. And then we have a variety of beef sale types. Now, we're still in the educating producers aspect of this conversation. So we need to think about, as a beef cattle producer, how do I want to resell my beef? So now at this point, I've navigated understanding the appropriate location where I can get my beef butchered. I understand what it takes to be able to resell individually packaged beef in my state. I know which jurisdictions within I have to adhere to. And now I need to decide, how am I going to identify what sort of product I'm going to provide? Are you going to do individually packaged 1 pound packages of hamburger? Are you going to do bundles, which comes with a variety of steaks and roasts and ribs and a small amount of burger? Are you going to do an entire quarter of beef? Maybe you want to only sell an entire beef at a time. How are you going to price that product? Is it going to be based on weight? Are you going to do it based on the number of units? Will it depend on where it's purchased at? These are all concepts that are really important to think about as you start to navigate identifying what your product is and how you're going to make it available on the market as the producer. And then, of course, you need to think about your production practices. Your cattle don't just magically turn into the premier quality of beef that exists in the country. You really need to consider how your day-to-day interactions with your cattle influence the meat quality that they have. And I relate this a lot back to, people who do hunting. If you go out and you hunt an animal and you know that the animal was put in under a lot of stress right up until the point of being killed, it does have a direct influence with the quality of the meat. Same is true for our domestic animals that we have butchered. If we can ensure a lifespan that is low stress, where they're effectively handled, where they're managed in a proper way, and if we can provide documentation for all of those things, we can create a track record for ourselves to understand the direct correlation that it had with the meat quality. So some of the documentation must-haves, I would say, how did you keep track of how the animal was cared for? How would you be able to prove traceability of your product? How do you know the production processes that were used on an animal that ended up not tasting the way that you wanted it to, if you don't have those things documented? So it's really important, even if it's a running notebook that you have sitting on your kitchen table, every time you encounter the cattle that you plan on turning into beef, I recommend sitting down, even if it's a quick 1 paragraph journaling about how you how you did things. Really keep track of that, record what days you interacted with them and what days that they may have been administered any vaccines, or what days they may have switched from one feed to the next. You know, age and condition, as well as the type of forage that the animal is exposed to, all has a direct correlation with meat quality. As a cow gets older, you know, their muscle often gets leaner. Types of breeds have a difference in what the meat quality is like. And, you know, even within one breed, the quality of genetics can have a direct impact on the quality of beef. So these are all considerations as a producer you should just be aware of. You need to educate yourself on, so that as you move forward, you can help to inform the consumer why buying directly from you is beneficial. So now I want to speak a little more specifically to DX beef. The products that I've offered have mattered. How I have sold these products have both had their pros and cons. The majority of the product that I sell currently is in the small burger bundle amount, far to the left on the screen. Burger bundles are sold in 20-pound units, sold in 20-pound increments. So I have some families that will buy 60 pounds at a time, some will buy 100 pounds at a time. But really, I've broken the burger bundles down to 20 pounds. Like I mentioned earlier, my on-hand inventory that I thought was going to carry me into May sold out in March as a result of the COVID food market demand. The consistency of providing ground burger has really been beneficial for me, because I know that no matter what, the product that I am providing has the same taste, the same quality, the same texture, because it's ground beef. One animal, even one steak to the next steak, can have a different cutability. It can have a different texture to it, depending on the time of the year, the age of the animal, the genetics of the animal. And really what a consumer is looking for is consistency in the product. So if I'm able to provide them a quality, locally raised piece of ground beef, they know what they're getting from me every single time. And the reality is too, I'm able to sell to any demographic. A lot of consumers don't understand that certain steaks need to be cooked and prepared different ways. They don't understand that how fast or how hot you prepare meat can directly correlate with how tasty that product is, especially when you're working in the grass-fed meat market. And so providing a very consistent product in the form of ground beef has helped me to establish that consistency with my customers. Each of my burger bundles, they're resold as state inspected for individual resale. So if you guys can see in that picture, it has a label that is South Dakota state inspected and certified. This is a product that I get processed at a state inspection facility. And it's critical to understand that just because you drop your animal off at a state inspected facility, that does not mean that your beef is going to be state inspected. You have to actually schedule it with the butcher on a day when the state inspector will be there to be able to inspect your product for resale. That's kind of where the whole name of Bootleggin or business came to be. I joke that when I started looking into raising beef, I didn't realize that what I was going to be doing was bootlegging. I thought that as long as I took my beef to a slaughter facility that had advertised being state inspected or was on the state inspected list, that my product was okay for resale. Fortunately, I worked with some really great butchers early on in the development of DX beef, and they were able to notify me that just because they were state inspected, that does not mean that every piece of product that comes out of their facility is state inspected, approved for resale. It simply means that their facility is up to standards for a state inspector to come in and to do a scheduled state inspection of product. So it takes a little bit of scheduling and making sure that you understand what you're doing and what sort of product you're going to be getting back from these butchers that are state inspected. An additional product that I offer is the bulk beef buy. The smallest amount of bulk beef that I sell is 1/4 of an animal, so a quarter of an animal. This is delivered on a to be determined basis, and these animals are actually sold as a live animal. So I sell 1/4 of an animal, or basically I find 4 families that want to purchase a live animal, which they will go in together and have processed most often at a custom exempt slaughter facility. So I sell them the live animal, and then I deliver the live animal to the butcher, just like I do when I sell a live animal at the sale barn. I deliver that animal to the sale barn and it gets sold, and I get my commission, or I get my paycheck from the sale barn. What I do here is I sell the animal to the families that are buying it for custom slaughter, and if it's within a certain range of me being able to deliver it to them, I just simply drop it by and at the butcher for them. This is probably one of the most labor intensive features of a product, because I really have to educate the consumer on how they should speak with the butcher in understanding how to process an entire cow. Some consumers don't realize that you can't decide to have all T-bones and no sirloins. You know, you have to really educate the consumer that each part of the cow breaks down into a different type of meat, and that there's only so many roasts that you can get made from an animal. There's only so many steaks that you can get made from an animal. And each of these steaks come from a different part. Sometimes if you choose to have one type of steak, you don't get to have the other. And so it just takes a lot of building a relationship with the consumer and educating them on how to navigate that custom butchering process. And then another product that we offer is wholesale sourced beef. This is a discounted per pound price with a minimum requirement of 100 pounds ordered from DX Beef per month. These are selectively invited wholesale sourcing opportunities because I want to know that those people who are using my beef, whether it's in their storefront or they're selling it in their storefront, I really want to make sure that their mission and their vision for their business is in line with DX Beef. It's rooted in promoting local community development, and it's promoting resilient food systems. And this is, again, product that is state inspected for individual resale, so that they're not getting in trouble, I'm not getting in trouble. It's approved by the state to be resold. And it's been a great way for me to promote the product and to share what the product has to offer to the community members, but also in supporting local businesses and just local businesses building together a capacity to bring communities together and to connect consumers with the producers. And over on the right in red is DX Beef's response to the COVID-19 supply and demand crisis. The 5% community cow share is similar to the bulk beef buys in the fact that it's several families that pool together and they buy shares in a cow based on 5% of the live weight value of this animal. And they purchase basically a share in a live animal that's similar to the bulk beef buy, will be processed at a custom exempt slaughter facility. This is basically my immediate response to the fact that some of our grocery store shelves are going empty. We don't have an easy transition for direct from producer to consumer to be able to get access to locally raised beef. We have a very limited amount of slots for South Dakota inspected resale approved meat processing in the state. And so I'm just trying to get multiple families together who are willing to go in on purchasing one animal, and they will all work together to get it processed at a custom slaughter facility, and they fully understand the entire aspect of it. It's an excessive amount of paperwork and working with multiple families and just educating all of them. But again, to me, it falls in line with our overarching goal of really truly promoting a local, more resilient food system. And I'm hopeful in the fact that as we continue to build out and expand these local food markets. It's going to be beneficial to not only producers, but consumers in the long run as we work our way through COVID-19. So we talked a little bit about the standards and the practices and the types of products that you can offer. And then I showed you some of the products that DX Beef offers, but I also want to share with you, some of our standards. We're very specific in the slaughter facilities that we use, because I feel like I have a good working relationship with them, and that I know that they're going to be honest with me when I have questions for them about their slaughtering protocols. We have very open communications, I feel, and that transparency is important to me, because then it allows me to be transparent with my consumers. Cattle management and handling protocol on the DX Ranch is really critical for us. I have a written record of who administers vaccines. Anytime there's a vaccine that is used on our ranching operation, I'm very specific about who gets to give vaccines. I make sure that they're educated and they know what they're doing and the appropriate handling protocols for these types of animal health protocols. We really stress effective cattle handling, and I'm truly not afraid to engage with any of our help or our neighbors that contribute to us being able to complete our production cycle in a year, and just sharing with them, I'm sorry if it seems like I'm being really picky, but I have to be able to guarantee that this animal can be resold in the form of meat. And if I don't know who's giving the vaccine, where it's being administered, if I don't know how this animal was handled through this shoot facility, then I can't guarantee the product. And we come from an area of really high quality animal handling to begin with, so this is a really easy thing for me to do. But the more I document it, the easier it is for me to share that with the consumers and to help kind of negate some of the falsehoods that exist about cattle managers. And what it all boils down to is we want to be able to provide a guaranteed product to our consumers. Now, the revenue model for DX Beef, one is I sell, like I said, direct to consumer. So we go from the producer of DX Beef right up to the consumer. The other is I sell to a wholesaler, and the wholesaler then provides that product either in the form of an additional value-added product, such as a cooked burger, or resells it directly to the consumer for their own upcharge. This has been really helpful for me through COVID-19, because I've been able to partner with local businesses to continue to provide them product that is local and safe and that they can rely on, and then also contribute to their business, which has probably also been impacted through COVID-19. You Betcha Watecha is my very first wholesaler, the local cafe that promotes local resilient food systems here on Cheyenne River Sioux Indian Reservation. And you can see quite a few examples of DX Beef there in their products that they make available in their cafe. And what this has also done for me at DX Beef is to provide a place for people to go try my product before they invest in a 20-pound bundle of beef. They can swing by You Betcha Watecha, they can buy a burger, and they can get a taste of what local beef, what that flavoring is like, and then it drives the consumers directly to me to be able to purchase, or they can purchase right from Sherry there at You Betcha Watecha. So now I'm hoping that some level of discussion throughout this presentation has inspired you to think about starting a beef business, and not just selling the live cattle, but thinking about how you can help to fill the gap of our current local food systems. So step one, I say, is you have to know your product and your clientele and the market demands. If you decide that you're going to sell a product, you really need to know that there is a local demand for your product. The benefit of the live auction markets for live cattle is that you know that there's every week going to be someone there buying it. It's not to say that the price is always going to be fair. It depends on what the market fluctuation does that week, but you know that there's always going to be a buyer of your live cattle. So if you are interested in expanding into the beef business, I recommend that you ensure there is going to be a buyer for you there as well. you can go about selling beef or getting started in selling beef by selling some shares, starting to do a couple of quarters at a time. Make your goal to be to sell one full cow or one full butcher within the next month or two. Understand, educate yourself in everything that you need to know in order to produce beef, so that you can identify your product, identify the market, connect the two, and then start that process. And then you just continue to grow your goal. As you grow your goal, you start to legitimize your product. You come up with a brand, you start to market heavier, you probably establish an online website, and then you make your way to step 3, where you eventually are expanding your market. You're looking at wholesale options or subscription beef options, or understanding how you're going to enhance or strengthen your label. Maybe you get SAM registered so that federal procurement contracts can come through, and you can be selling your product straight to schools, and you can be working to expand your network of consumers beyond the local communities that you've engaged in. And more than likely, you're going to understand that website and digital sales truly do matter. I partnered with Barn to Door in October of 2019. And what they have helped me to do in establishing an online presence for DX Beef, I feel has really helped me to learn how to share my story. And it has made an online purchasing option that is pretty pain-free. It is a lot more effective than Facebook messaging back and forth. And I truly do feel like it is a large reason as to why I sold out a month and a half in advance through this food crisis. Some really great statistics that they were able to offer me in my most recent talk with them is that there's been a 30% or 30 times increase in terms of volume that their farmers that they help to represent digitally across the country have realized since the COVID-19 outbreak. Consumers across America went from 1 out of 20 consumers buying online food to 1 out of 3 people wanting to buy their food online. So now truly is the time, even if you are in a business and you don't know if your online ordering platform is the strongest, strengthen it. Sit down, spend the rest of the day, spend the rest of the week making that online portal easy to function. Make sure your inventory makes sense, make sure it's all up to date so that you can see some of those sales drive forward. Make sure also too that you're figuring out ways to inform your consumers. You now, as an educated producer, have the ability to inform consumers and share with them what exactly it is that makes your product more appealing than what they can get in other marketplaces. Recognize that you as a cattle rancher speak a different language than most consumers, and you also come from a different background. I have a deep freeze where I can fit 2 whole cows worth of beef in my back bedroom, but most of the consumers that I sell to have a small refrigerator sized freezer compartment on their fridge. So selling only quarters isn't going to work for them, or make sure that they understand when they buy a quarter, they're going to need additional freezer space. Really think through these steps from live animal all the way to when they're preparing it on their kitchen stove, so that there's no confusion or headache involved in the process. And I guarantee that that client will be very committed to you and to your business and to supporting you through that the way that you've supported them through it. And I found this graphic online a couple of days ago, and this truly, I think, is the distribution model that we're seeing, and a part of why we see so many of online food sales skyrocketing right now is as a result of the social distancing and the isolation that is being encouraged to try to slow the spread of COVID-19. The distribution model of buying directly from the farmer or rancher results in very minimal contact or cross-contamination of different people encountering your product before you're able to feed it to your family at home. And right now, there's a lot of people that are very scared, very concerned. They don't want to overexpose their family. And you as the producer have the ability to step up and to help ease some of their fears and to share with them why buying directly from you is beneficial, as long as you are educated in knowing what it is that you're providing them. And what I would leave with you all today is, some concepts worth considering as a producer. What are your long-term plans? I really wouldn't look at this market venture, if you're seriously thinking about doing it, as a get rich quick or a quick fix kind of scheme. Realize that it could be a long-term transition that you make that is regenerative, that enhances your ability to impact your land resources in a better way, in a less exploitive way, perhaps, and that it helps to heal the food systems that exist within your communities. Consider some of the tax implications. Get a little deep into understanding your state or your tribe's tax laws and knowing where you need to register a business at and what sort of tax implications your state or tribe has put out for direct to consumer sales. And if you have any questions at all, please do not be afraid to give me a shout. I've put both my work email with indianag.org there, as well as my DX Beef email address. My website is dxbeef.com. You can find out more information about the products that we're selling there, or you can follow us on any of our social media sites or join our mailing list. Like I said, I'm really using COVID-19 as a chance to strengthen my ability as a technical assistant, and sharing from one producer to the next some of the trials and the successes that I've seen, some of the failures when I've fallen flat on my butt, because I really believe in connecting our foods to the communities, connecting our ag producers to growing the food and localizing that food dollar. And I'll do whatever I can to share my knowledge with you all. And I guess now then I would ask if there were any questions, Courtney, that I could give a whirl.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much for presenting today. The one question that we do have in the chat is, can we get a copy of this presentation to share with our families that we may be in business with?
Yes, absolutely. I will do my best to kind of clean it up a little bit. Most of the slides actually have some of my written notes in them too. So I'll make sure all those notes are cleaned up, and I'll make it available digitally, maybe available for download on our website at indianag.org.
Awesome. And if there are any other questions, now's the question portion of the webinar. So I guess, does anyone have any questions for Kelsey? All right, so we've got a couple more questions. There's, how much does it cost to get a state inspection?
Yeah, that's a great question. It probably varies from one state to the next, and it probably varies on where the location is. And it varies on what product you're trying to sell, as I understand it. So if you're just doing ground beef, there's a couple of required state inspection and quality testing that needs to be done, and that's a cost that you as the producer will incur. But what I've realized is it's not much more than around. Can I stop sharing my screen, Courtney? Is that okay?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so that I can actually pull up some of my receipts and make sure that what I'm saying is accurate here. Was there another question that I can go to until I pull that up?
Yeah, so here's one. How many do you sell? Is there a mobile slaughter unit in South Dakota?
Yeah, great question. So there are some mobile slaughter units in South Dakota. There's an ability to purchase a federally inspected unit in the United States that I've actually been kind of dreaming about eventually being able to grow our business into owning one. But I have not currently slaughtered through one of them yet. I guess the two butchers that I use are around an hour and a half from me, and both of them are one in-place permanent facility, but I do know that there are some mobile slaughter facility units that are functioning within South Dakota. I'm just not as familiar with their processes as I do not process there. And as far as how many do I process, I feel like that's a really hard question for me to answer. Last year, I did right around 20 animals. But this year, I'm going to reach around 20 animals processed by the end of May. So the growth has been exponential for me as a small direct-to-consumer business in just comparing the first quarter of 2019 to the first quarter of 2020. Was there another question, Courtney?
Yes. Okay. So the next question is, do you do your own shipping? That seems like it could be a nightmare.
Correct. It would be a nightmare. Right now, I'm only state inspected, remember? So I don't have the capacity to ship beyond the state of South Dakota. So what I do is I actually schedule pickup zones locations when there is a large demand for my product across the state. I will actually coordinate the purchases to all be picked up at one common location within a certain time frame. So if consumers from Rapid City or Sioux Falls area, which are two of the bigger city areas in the state, I say, all right, great, thank you for your order. Please meet me at this location between these time zones to come pick up your order. And beyond that, a lot of the sales, majority of the sales that I do are right here on the Cheyenne River Sioux Indian Reservation. Like I said, I really believe in trying to fill that local market need, and I haven't had to go too far to sell all of the product that I've been able to produce.
Perfect. It looks like there's two more questions. Okay, so are there extra or different regulations on reservations, or would it be federal and tribal guidelines?
That's a great question. And there's really no way to answer that with a blanket statement that applies to all reservations or states guidelines. But I definitely encourage you to follow through on that line of thinking and dig deeper into understanding what your tribal food codes might be. If you don't have one, maybe reach out to your councilmen and women to ask them about the progress of implementing a tribal food code, and maybe even offer them some guidance on what that looks like. There's some phenomenal resources and tools that have been made available at no charge to tribal leadership to enhance and expand their policies to include all of that.
Perfect. The next question is, being on a reservation, taking the cattle off reservation for slaughter and selling to tribal entities, tribal departments, etc., would that be federal inspection and tribal food code ?
Want me to reread the question here? Of course, it's from Elise. That would be a great question, Elise. So being on a reservation and taking the cattle off of the reservation for slaughter and selling to tribal entities, tribal departments, etc., would that be federal inspection? Great question, Elise. So I guess I am of the belief that I really believe in having the tribal policies to promote their own food codes and to establish guidelines to producers as to what the requirements are. However, if you're taking your beef off of the reservation and getting it slaughtered within a facility within the state of South Dakota, you can resell it anywhere within the state of South Dakota. Now, as long as it's state inspected and it bears the individual for resale approval. If there are different laws in place by your tribal regulatory body that says something different, obviously that's not the case in your instance. But in my instance, we don't have a lot of federal inspection opportunities at facilities here in South Dakota, which is why I go the state inspection route. We also don't have a tribal inspection route yet. I'm hoping that there is one in the making. And at that point, I will exercise the tribal inspection because I appreciate the sovereignty that is placed behind the food code that my tribe would establish. I don't know that I truly gave your answer justice, but I tried.
Perfect. Another question is, how do you handle taxes and income reporting to tribes, state, and federal entities? For example, if the business is listed as an LLC.
Great question, Matthew. Right now, currently in the state of South Dakota, I hold a tribal and state business license. In the state of South Dakota, any purchases that are made on Cheyenne River, when I file my state level taxes, it has to be registered as sold within this jurisdiction. And then the tax then gets handled by the South Dakota department to get that tax back to the tribe for because it was sold within the jurisdiction of the tribe. I'm sorry, I'm really fumbling over my questions because I'm not a lawyer and I don't want to falsely represent or say what I'm trying to say. And then as far as an LLC goes, I established the LLC in last fall. So I have not yet filed taxes federally as an LLC for DXB. Last year we were functioning as a sole proprietorship. So I personally claimed the income against business expenses as a sole proprietor. But it's definitely a discussion that I know Lottie and Courtney and I have talked about exploring further and really bringing in some experts to talk about the business structure benefits when you enter into this and how that can be used to your advantage, or if you don't know about it, how it can be a significant disadvantage.
Perfect. And so we have another comment. It says, this is not a question, but I just have had this conversation many times, and this presentation is what we need to help our ranchers to share an actual value added story. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Terry. And I also wanted to share, I finally pulled up the receipt. In the state of South Dakota, state inspection was not something that was specifically built out in my receipts, but I do believe that my butcher accounts for an additional 5 cents per hanging weight if it's state inspected. In addition to that, there is around $150 worth of testing that I had to do on the batch of animals that I brought in for E. coli and the different foodborne, the different foodborne illnesses or diseases. So I had to actually, I dropped 3 animals off. The total inspection fee was $150 for the testing, in addition to 5 cents per each hanging weight pound. And then I see a question from Heidi. How do you find out the additional guidelines to be considered organic, grass-fed, free range? Great, those are all really great questions. I guess it would depend which standard you're trying to meet. I do not label my product. It is not stamped American grass-fed because I have not received the certification yet. That's a part of what I call phase 3 in market expansion. The very first trademark that I applied for and was approved for was the Made and Produced by American Indians. And I was really proud to be approved to be able to bear that trademark on my product. Now I'm going to probably be going after some of those additional certifications. There's different national agencies that kind of control the standard or control the regulation of who gets to use those particular stamps on their product. And so you'll notice that I inform the consumer that the product that I have has been grass finished, and they can rely on that because they are buying it directly from me, and they know that me as the producer is good for my word. But right now it does not currently, the DX beef product does not currently bear the certified grass-fed label that it can in the future once I get certified and I pay all my membership dues and all of that. And the same thing for organic and for free range. There's some sort of entity that is controlling what those standards are. It's not only important for producers to understand what those standards are, but also consumers, because a lot of times consumers are misled and misinformed through the labeling process, and they think that they're getting a product because of what the stamp says. But truly, if they were to dive into some of the standard protocols and the expectations set forth by the organization that regulates those labels, I think they would realize that as a consumer, they're kind of misguided and misinformed. So that's a great question.
Perfect. So that brings us right to the end of the webinar. If there are any additional questions, I don't know, Kelsey, if you want to type your information into the chat just one more time.
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
the screen. And yeah, thank you so much for presenting today.
Absolutely. And I'll go ahead. I'm trying to figure out how to type it in, Courtney. So if you could type it in for me, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
But for those of you that are called in, my email address is kelsey@indianag.org, KELSEY@INDIANAG.org. And you can also find my information on the IAC's website. Again, thank you all for joining us today and handling all the hiccups. Like I said, this is my first time transitioning from just being the cattle rancher and the beef business owner to actually trying to share some of the hurdles that I've overcome and trying to inspire more cattle ranchers to make the transition that I made because of the benefits that I've realized and the need that our communities are currently sharing with us to try to reconnect with the producer and buy a more local food source.
Great, thank you so much, Kelsey. We do have everyone's email address, and so we can notify you once we have this video up on our IAC YouTube channel, and then also maybe the presentation shared on the IAC website, and then possibly follow up as well. But thank you all, and we look forward to our continuing more of webinar series in the coming months. So feel free to reach out. Thanks so much. Have a great day.